I'll start recording. And yeah, welcome everyone to this 21st Century Visionary Talk with the one and only Naveen Jain. And a lot of you probably already know Naveen and who he is. But just to give a brief bio, Naveen is an entrepreneur and philanthropist driven to solve the world's biggest challenges through innovation. A man who knows no limits, Naveen pushes big dreams into action, spurring massive cultural and technological change. His audacious vision and magnetic personality continually inspire others to follow what feels impossible. And he's the billionaire founder of Moon Express, World Innovation Institute, Viome, I know him, TalentWise, and multiple other companies. Naveen sees beyond the current business and technological landscape, creating companies that make a true impact. So it's really a pleasure to have you here, Naveen, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today and share your insights.
Thank you, Sanath. It's very kind of you.
So just to get started, I want to just to give a brief overview of how this kind of workshop will go. We'll first ask Naveen, and he'll talk about, I think, his broader mindset around building a moonshot and how he goes about thinking of moonshots and moonshot thinking in general. And then we'll get to a little bit more about your own questions, and we'll open it up to Q&A as well. But throughout our conversation, feel free to drop in any questions you have in the chat, and we'll ask them if it's relevant to what we're discussing. But then you'll get a chance to ask directly as well towards the end. But so just to get started, Naveen, could you maybe give a little bit of a background about how you got to the place where you are? I know you started from very humble backgrounds in India, and then got to this place where you've started multiple companies and are doing amazing work in the world. So could you give a brief overview of how you got here?
Well, again, I just said thank you very much for having this conversation here, and I'm just so glad to be here. I want to give you a lot more about the thought process of what goes into it, and I hate talking about myself, so I'm going to limit less and less about who I am. But let's just give you an idea about the thought process about how do you create these massive moonshot companies. And I have, over the years, I have come up with this framework that when you want to start something that is really audacious, there are three things you ask yourself. Why this, why now, and why me? And why this is all about, you have to believe that what you're about to be doing actually may become successful. So you have to say, God forbid, I am actually successful in implementing the idea that I'm about to be doing. Would it help a billion people live a better life? And that tells you the things that you're doing are meaningful to a large amount of people. Because the only way you can create a large, long-term sustainable company is to improve lives of people. That means if your product or a service actually helps enough people live better, then they will pay for your services and you can create a sustainable enterprise. So yes, it's about doing good, but it's also about doing well for yourself. And doing good and doing well are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they always come together. The more people's life you can make better, the bigger the company you can create. But you can't just simply focus on creating a big company without improving the lives of people, because you can't do that in the long term. The second thing you have to always ask yourself is, why now? Because why is it that you want to start this company now, and is now the right time? And the best way to look at this stuff and is to say, what had changed in the last couple of years? But most importantly, what do you expect to happen in the next 3 to 5 years that will allow you to solve this problem today than it was possible a decade ago? Because if you're still using the 10-year-old technology, then you're going to get disrupted even before you start. So you have to see what exponential technologies are actually hitting the knee of the curve, where you are able to actually, reduce the cost, make the product better. And what are these technologies that in the next couple of years are going to significantly improve that will allow you to solve this problem? And I'm going to apply this to my last company, and I'm going to give you an idea about how I went through thinking about that. And the last thing is about why me? I mean, what is it that I am thinking that is different from what everyone else is thinking? That means, what question am I asking that is different from what everyone else is asking in this industry? Because the question you ask is the problem you solve. If you're asking exactly the same question that everyone else, then you're going to be solving exactly the same problem as anyone else. And you have to really think about what is the unique thing about your hypothesis, or what is one thing you believe in that others may disagree with, right? And that is really the crux of why you create something unique. So now let me apply this framework to my last company. So my last company is in the company called Viome, Viome, and that's in the healthcare space. And as you can possibly imagine, I have no background in healthcare, right? Just like I had no background in going, in astronomy, or in that sense, in space exploration. But I started the space exploration company. And the idea really is, you don't have to really know a lot about the industry. It is really about being a naive mind, looking at a problem from outside in. So once you become an expert at something, you become what I would say linear thinker. You become incrementalist. That means you are able to improve the thing by 10% or 15%, but you will never be able to do it by 10 times or 100 times. That requires you to fundamentally challenge the foundation of what experts have taken it for granted, and rethink and reimagine and recreate. Now, coming back to Viome, the first question was, our mission was, can we prevent and reverse chronic diseases? Now, our thing was, what if that was able to be able for us to understand what causes people to have these chronic diseases? And when I say chronic diseases, obesity, diabetes, heart diseases, depression, anxiety, Alzheimer, Parkinson's, autoimmune diseases, all types of cancer, including aging, is a chronic disease, right? What if we can prevent us from being old, our body from biologically being old? What if we can prevent cancers from happening? And the idea was that, can we prevent and intercept these diseases? And to answer the first question, God forbid you are actually successful, would it help 1 billion people? And the answer was 7.4 billion people, check mark. The next part was, why now? And why now was really interesting, because we see, to solve this problem, the multiple things have to happen. The number one is, you have to be able to digitize the human body. That means you take your analog body, all the fluids in your body, and can you able to actually understand what is going on inside the body? And to digitize, the cost of sequencing has to come down. And when we started the company about 5 years ago, the cost of sequencing was even human genome was about $1,000. And we were absolutely convinced that in the next couple of years, that will come down to about $100. What we didn't realize was the cost actually came down to $10. So while we were 10 times optimistic, we were actually turned out to be 10 times pessimistic about the cost coming down. And that is the beauty of exponential thinking. Human mind can never understand exponentiality. Human mind is designed to think linear, and linear thinking. That means it is 20 down, next will be 15, there'll be 10, but they never can think exponentially. Just to give you a simple exercise that I think most people will find fascinating. If I were to tell you that, hey, I have two propositions for you. I can give you $100 million right now, right? Or I can give you $1 today, $2 tomorrow, and just for 1 month, just for 30 days, I would double every single day what I gave you previously. And people say $1, $2, $4, $8, $60. Oh my God, it's never going to get anywhere. I would take $100 million right now, right? Guess what? If you did that, you would have lost out massively, because on day 30, it is going to be $1 billion. Day 29 is going to be $500 million, right? Human mind just cannot get there. It's just not what we do. And that is why we will always thinking, oh, it is $1,000, it will go down $900, $800, $700. You will never know. It's 1,000 becomes 500, 250, and 125, and literally next thing is 50, 25, and 10, and boom, is that, right? And that is really the thing, is that when things are moving that fast, we can understand that. Anyway, the next thing was really cost of processing the data, because you see, once you digitize, how would you process this massive amount of data? And the cost of computing was so high that we required supercomputing. And we were using this cloud computing, paying $40 per person just to process the data. And we knew that cost would come down to give or take about $10, right? And guess what happened? In 5 years, it came down to $1. I mean, just mind-boggling how fast the things were coming down. But the point was, we were thinking the right direction. The trend was these things will come down. AI, we knew, is going to get more and more powerful, and it did, right? And that's why we said it was important that time is now. Why me was the most important part. Everyone, we noticed that in the industry was focused on genes, your DNA. Everybody was focused on understanding the human DNA. And it occurred to us that people who are looking at DNA are asking the wrong question, because your DNA never changes. Today I measure your DNA and then you gain 400 pounds, your DNA is still the same, right? Now you become diabetic, now you have depression, now you have autoimmune diseases, your DNA never changes. So how can you look at DNA and tell someone that you're moving towards having the disease, or you're moving away from having a disease, because your DNA is static? But what does change is not your genes, but your gene expression. And we thought gene expression is always changing as you're developing a disease. Why not measure the gene expression? And no one has ever done gene expression. And we are the only company in the world that actually does gene expression. And it was someone, I said, look, if genes are not changing, how can you ever learn something from a gene that doesn't change? You have to have something that's changing as people develop a disease. And people say, oh, that's it, RNA, that's a gene expression. I said, why not measure RNA? And they looked at me as if I was an alien. It's like, you don't do RNA. RNA cannot be done. And I said, what do you mean it can't be done? There's got to be someone who has done it. And it took me a couple of months, and we found that somebody at Los Alamos National Lab was working on a biodefense work, and they were actually looking at messenger RNA, mRNA, which is what mRNA vaccines are. That means we'll be able to measure mRNA of every single thing in the body. And that was literally 5 years ago, we decided mRNA was going to be big. And we literally decided mRNA sequencing is going to be the one, how we're going to go build a company. And that is, everyone was focused on, people were talking about very, in the scientific community about microbiome. Most people had never heard of microbiome, but scientific community was saying that all diseases happen in the gut. So your gut microbiome actually controls the diseases. Now we know that even the people, when they develop cancer, the microbiome is inside the tumor. In fact, they just found that even though you take immunotherapy or chemotherapy, when it doesn't work, it's because of your gut microbiome, and you change you do a fecal transplant, change the gut microbiome, the same drug starts working that used to fail, right? Now we are finding that changing the gut microbiome gets rid of addiction, gets rid of autism, gets rid of all depression. And it is amazing that changing gut microbiome gets rid of acne, eczema, and all the different diseases like MS, Alzheimer, and Parkinson's. And it is literally, we think we're inventing something new. What we don't know is this is something what Hippocrates said 2,500 years ago. He said, all diseases begin in the gut. Let food be thy medicine, let thy medicine be the food. So we are literally going back to what we knew 2,500 years ago, except we forgot. Now we have very precisely to be able to understand that. Anyway, that is the framework that I use, Sanat. Sorry about taking a long time, but I just want to explain the concept, because once you get that, you can apply that to almost everything. You go out on a date, ask, why her, why now, why me, right? Same question.
Yeah, definitely. Also, Sid is also co-hosting this event, and he's the CEO of Tiles. So I forgot to. I was just too excited, so I jumped in. But Sid, you
No,
wanna?
no worries.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
Okay.
mean, you're excited for the right reason. So, hi guys, I'm Sid. I'm the CEO of Tile, so I'm just helping out co-host. But yeah, I really appreciate the intro, and it's really great, sort of understanding, and really very glad to have Naveen here. And sort of based off that next question, as sort of just to sort of bounce off of what you already had. You talked a lot about sort of your framework for going into many of these aspects, that you're defying some expectations in some ways, where you're looking at mRNA and you're looking at these different laboratories, and you're looking at these different routes. How does that really, what advice would you give entrepreneurs who are going down a route that is very, very uphill, if you would say?
Well, Interestingly, it's easier to build a audacious company than to build a smaller company. Because when you say, I'm going to build an iPhone app that will help you find a roommate, people say, oh, great, go do it, right? Have fun. But when you say, I'm going to build a company that will prevent people from having a disease, suddenly you wake up people, and the best and the brightest people want to work on the toughest problem. Best and the most successful people want to create their legacy. They have been successful, they want to be significant, and they want to work on things that, if successful, basically becomes their legacy of what is possible, right? And you attract the best talent when you're working on really audacious problems. And when you attract the best talent, guess what happens? Money follows. Every venture capitalist wants to invest in, because you have the best team that you have assembled. So everything comes from really believing something massive can be done, and you are that person, right? And believing in yourself is the first thing. That means today the entrepreneurs actually are capable of doing things that only superpowers did, right? Whether it's going to the moon. Look at the space today. Space used to be only done by superpowers. Russia and America and Chinese. That's it. And no one could go to the space. Obviously now India is coming along. But the fact is, there's never been that thing that used to be only large countries superpowers. And if you look at the space today, every single company that's going to the space is private company. It's really, look at the Richard. I mean, when pick a name you want, they all are now private companies are doing what used to be in the domain of countries, right? And that is really the thing. Healthcare used to be the domain of governments. Guess what? The healthcare is going to be done by you, I, and someone else who say, you know what, enough is enough. We're going to go out and fix that problem. Education is going to be solved by entrepreneurs rethinking the way that education needs to be done. It should no longer be about learning skills. It needs to be about solving problems. And all those things will come about as we move along and change the way people have done in the past. So the idea of going to a college with one place and they only have certain faculties that are good at some but not so good at others. Why not bring the best faculty from all over the world to things, and you can use them virtually? I mean, and that's the beauty of the thing. What COVID has done has advanced, in my opinion, when we, despite all the suffering that are happening around COVID, what you're going to find is 10 years from now, we're going to look at COVID and realize this was the best thing that could have happened to humanity. It advanced the healthcare by 10 years. It's going to advance the lot of the technology that have never been popular will suddenly now starting to change about having these virtual meetings. It used to be that you have to physically go to events, and all those things are fundamentally now changing and becoming a part of our life. So I really think in the long term, our future is very bright because of these things. I'm going to actually shut that thing if I can do a shit. The sun is just starting to come directly in the
Of
eyes. Give me
course.
1 second.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, great. Really appreciate, that's an incredible, response and answer. But yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna wait for him to come back. Otherwise, I'm literally talking to a chair.
Oh,
But
no,
yeah.
I'm listening to you. By the way, you can ask me the question.
Okay.
I will
Uh,
answer. I'm just not. I'm
It's
just not
not.
in front of the camera.
Of course.
Great.
Yeah, you can take the next one, man.
Right. Yeah. So just to go off of what you mentioned in terms of, you mentioned education, and I know you've spoken a lot about the problems with the current education system and how that's probably the next big challenge you want to tackle after healthcare. And so I'm really curious how you would. So that's an issue I'm really passionate about as well, and I think a lot of people on the call, especially being students, we've noticed how the education system is flawed and it's not serving us. So if you were to apply moonshot thinking to this problem of reinventing the education system and not just teaching skills, but giving people leadership abilities and problem solving skills, which are really timeless, right? Not something that's going to be obsolete like you talk about. Could you talk about how you would go about thinking through reinventing education with this moonshot framework? For example, I just want to give people kind of uh, an insight into your mind in this problem specifically as well.
Yeah. So if you think about education, I think Sanath, you laid down the problem very nicely. That today our education system is designed all around teaching skills, and what really happens is the skills become obsolete even by the time you graduate. So you have a skill that's no longer needed. And I think what's really needs to happen is that education really needs to be around solving problems, and most problems tend to be multidisciplinary. That means you need to apply massive different disciplines to a single problem. That means having a broader education is going to be much better than having a really deep education in a particular skills that you need. Other thing is, the whole gamification of education system, the feedback loop of the education system. And also in some sense you have to start thinking about that, even though skills are not needed, but how do you have still enough people that know in depth of where the minefields are? So there are going to be people who need to still have deep skills, but at the level, higher level, as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, you don't need to have a skill in that industry, because you can hire people with the in-depth experience, and your job is to be able to challenge what experts would never be challenged. And I can give you examples that how experts just never would do things that will come out of entrepreneur things, right? So coming back to Viome, I'm just going to give you an example of both asking the right questions and asking, and also, but more importantly, understanding the root cause of the problem versus symptom of the problem. So let me give you one anecdotal story around Viome. So, when we do the test, we look at your blood and we look at your stool. That means you're looking at your gut microbiome and what's happening inside the body. And we literally send you a kit at home, and you drop the finger prick blood, and then you do the touch of a stool, and we analyze that. And we have been doing that for 2 years. I was with a walk with my chief scientist, and on a walk during the walk, and I said, look, the things that we look in the gut is all microbial matters, and what we look in the blood is all around human genes. Why can't we just mix them together and just do one sample, and then we can essentially use AI to be able to separate them? And as a scientist, to him, it was like even asking that question was insulting. Like, you don't mix two samples into one and analyze them. It's like, what kind of science is that? And I said, tell me why so he said, that will never work. And I said, help me understand why it will not work. Because to me, it's really clear. My simple mind says, you look at the stuff, they're all microbial gene expression. We know what gene expression comes from microbes. And even if there is some gut lining shedding, we know what genes are in the gut lining. And everything in the blood, we know what is going to come out of that. So you can combine everything together, analyze them, and use AI to separate them. And after half an hour of arguing with him, and he said, oh my God, this just might work. And we tested, and next thing we know, we did them separately, we did them together, and results were almost identical. Now, that simple conversation reduced our cost by 50%. And it's just because I didn't know why, as a naive person, that would not work, right? And as a scientist, they would have never, ever thought about pooling two different types of samples into one. Right? And that to me is that kind of thinking that you apply in all of the things that you may think, of course I would have done the same thing, but it just really, you have to constantly thinking about how do you go out and change the way the people doing things. The other concept I was going to bring up was this concept of root cause versus symptoms. Most of us have this tendency to solve the problem that we see, right? So if we say, but people don't have a clean drinking water or a fresh water, that is the problem. And we go out and say, can we build the nano filters, take a dirty water, make it fresh? And you're trying to solve the problem of fresh water because there is not enough fresh water, because even though we live in the planet, which is 70% covered in water, but it's all salt water. So how do you create? So you're looking at desalinization, you're looking at everything because there is not enough fresh water that's there. Now, if you work on that problem, it's not that the problem is bad, but until you ask the question, why do we have the shortage of fresh water? Where does all the fresh water that's coming down the mountain and the river, where does it all end up going? And it turns out that most of the fresh water is used for agriculture. Think about that. So most of the fresh water is used for agriculture. We say, oh, in that case, why don't we just change the agriculture? Can we use aeroponic agriculture, hydroponic agriculture, and other ways of doing the agriculture, including using lightly salted water that will allow us to free up the fresh water for humans? And you feel really, really good about it until you ask the next question, which says, hey, all this agriculture, do we really eat all that food? Well, it turns out majority of agriculture is used to feed the cattle. So all of the agriculture that we have is primarily to feed the cattle. And he said, oh, so the reason we have lack of fresh water is because we use agriculture. Agriculture is used, right? And ultimately, all that means is if people want to eat meat, can you grow the meat? Either use the, make the meat-like thing using a plant, or actually grow the meat like a muscle tissue using the stem cells from a cow, and that will be identical to what nature does, except you're only making the muscle tissue. No reason to make eyes and ears and liver because you're not eating them anyway. So just make the muscle tissues. Now, suddenly, by solving the problem that you thought was a freshwater problem, it turned out to be a synthetic biology problem of actually growing meat. And that is my point. So the root cause was the cattle, and you thought the fresh water is the problem. And I always go down in everything you're doing to understand, is it a symptom or is it really the underlying reason for doing that? The only other story I can tell you around the same concept is I think it's in Eastern philosophy. You see, there was a gentleman at the Ganges River, and the river is coming down, and he's actually walking these bodies that are wounded, and he's filing the bodies are coming down, and the priest is sitting there and grabbing the body from the river, trying to heal them, grabbing the body, and there is a man who walks past and just looks at him and keeps walking. And this guy screams and saying, don't you have any compassion when you have these bodies that are wounded are coming down, and you don't stop here to help me? And he said, I'm going up the stream to find out why people are getting hurt rather than trying to solve the problem right here when they're already hurt. And that is the thing, is you got to go understand why this problem even exists, right? When people say, I want to build an orphanage for the children who are actually orphans, well, you need to figure out how to become orphan to begin with and solve that problem instead of building more orphanages, right? And once you get that thinking, you'll see it applies to everything you do in life.
That's amazing. That's a really important concept, I think, and it also kind of ties into using exponential technology to address the problems in a complete, like, reinvent the whole and disrupt the industry, right? So I know you talk a lot about exponential technology. You're on the board of Singularity University. I think all your kids went through the program there. So how would you recommend, if we as students want to understand exponential technology, and use it to build companies that disrupt entire industries, but we don't have access to Singularity University to attend there? Or how can we learn about it? Like, what are the next steps you'd recommend to, if we don't have any knowledge about that?
But sir, that's the beauty of the things today. You can literally, every single knowledge you want is available to you today. You can go to YouTube and you can search for Singularity University, and literally you will find every lecture that you people pay for is available. I told our children, go spend every day, spend 1 hour listening to TED Talks. Go 1 hour, just go through Singularity University. Look at the MIT. I mean, literally every course that MIT teaches is online, available for free, right? So point is, if you want knowledge, knowledge is available to every single person in every part of the planet. It doesn't matter whether you live in Africa or you live in India or you live in US. You have access to same knowledge, same resources, because money flows where the opportunities are. Money is not patriotic. Nobody says, I'm going to only invest here. They say, look, oh, Flipkart is doing well, I'm going to go invest in Flipkart. Oh, this company is doing well, I'm going to invest there. It doesn't matter where you are. The main thing is, now by the same thing about people. It used to be people say, oh, the bright talent is in Silicon Valley, I have to be there because that's where people are, and people come to office. And now it doesn't matter. You could be sitting anywhere. It is exactly the same. That means you have access to the same engineers, same thinking, same thing everywhere in the world, because everybody's working virtually anyway. So it doesn't matter where you are. And my point is, that allows you to now have access to everything. What you don't have is access to the mindset. And really the thing is that only you can change. No one else can change how you think. And a lot of people have this bad habit of following other people's habits. And so people say, oh, what time do you wake up? What do you do? What are your habits like? I mean, that's really dumb question, because you follow people's habits, you don't become like them. You become like them by thinking like them, not by acting like them, right? So Like Tony Robbins takes ice bath every day. You can take ice bath 3 times a day. You're not going to become Tony Robbins, right? You become him by thinking like him, not by acting like him. And that's really the key is we have to understand why certain people are always successful and why others fail. It is about hacking your mindset, about when you look at the same problem, you look at the identical event, and some people act very differently, like COVID. Some people think, oh my God, the world has fallen apart. I need to now, bundle down, save myself, and world is ending. And I look at COVID and say, oh my God, what an amazing opportunity that it has created. Many industries that would have never been created are now being created. This thing has suddenly opened up platform to things like Clubhouse. Look at this company called Hopin. Hopin didn't even exist a year ago. Now it's worth 5 billion in 12 months. Right? It's because they created a virtual platform for events. My point I'm going to make is every time that happens, any disruption creates opportunity. So always look at every problem is an opportunity for an entrepreneur to actually solve the problem, help people, and create an amazingly great enterprise.
Yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, we unmuted at the same time. Sorry, Sanat. Yeah, no, thank you so much. That's an incredible answer. And, you were mentioning Clubhouse and Hopin, and that's 100% accurate. I mean, Clubhouse shot up to a huge valuation by Sequoia in a matter of months. And it's, absolutely insane. I mean, now you have celebrities going there just to chill out. And, you really have a huge mass adoption with people wanting to be a part of this, exclusive craze with Clubhouse. But that sort of leads into a sort of question that's a little bit more on the technical side. When you're starting and you're a serial entrepreneur, you've exited several times. Obviously, that one aspect that's needed for lots of startups is sort of capital. And the capital that's needed for this comes in several different ways. So venture rounds can range from pre-seed and seed to develop your minimum viable product, proof of concept. And then you go through the series A, B, C. So could you take us through sort of your experiences with venture funding and how you levered the money and resources that these particular investors gave you to the growth of your business to eventual moonshots?
The first thing is, again, you have to have a idea about what is it that you think is a big problem, how you plan to attack that problem. And you don't have to have any solution. You just have to be able to come up with and say, here is a problem. Here's why everyone else is thinking wrong. And here is how we can solve this. And this is my idea. And now, if you can also come up with the right group of team that actually is capable of doing it, then it becomes really trivial for people to give you money because you have the right ideas, right vision, right team to execute on that. And if you have someone on the team that has done it in the past, then it's a double whammy. I mean, so triple whammy, right? Then you have a track record and you have a team and you have an idea, and that just becomes a no-brainer for anyone else. And one thing all venture capitalists hate is missing out. I mean, the FOMO is the biggest thing. If they think this could be the next big thing and they are the only stupid people who didn't realize it, they look back and they always worry about they could have and they should have, and and so they literally fall over themselves if they see there's an idea that could potentially be big. So to me, don't focus as much on just about raising money. Money will come to you when you least want it. Money does not come to you because you want it really badly, right? And that's really the interesting part is find a great idea, find people who are successful. And sometimes many of these people really would work for you for free because they say they want equity in the company. And then literally your burn is so small, you build a tiny prototype that shows what it is capable of doing. And then literally the money will come to you, right? So point is there are many, many ways of bootstrapping a problem. And the bootstrapping, you take tiny thing, just roll it and start to show that when this ball is going to go down the hill of this snow, is going to become a massive snowball. And I'm showing you that a snowball is starting to happen.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense, and totally, I think a lot of people start with securing funding, and that becomes a roadblock in their path. But like you said, it should really be about the idea first, and you can find ways to circumvent venture funding in the beginning and just go with prototyping on a minimal level, I think. And also, I know that people have a lot of questions, so if you have any questions, feel free to type in the chat so that we can address it, or you can directly ask it as well. But just
Other
to
thing Sanat, I was going to say on a
yeah.
funding side, also don't be afraid to go on a crowdfunding site. I mean, literally, you can now raise up to $50 million on a crowdfunding. I mean, so you don't have to rely on these, what I call lemmings. The venture companies are like lemmings, they follow each other. But you don't have to convince them to raise money. You can go raise $1 million, $2 million on a bunch of crowdfunding platform, and that is another good resource. Don't underestimate the power of getting enough money to build your prototype just on a crowdfunding. And there are tens of websites out there where you can do the crowdfunding.
Right, that makes a lot of sense as well. And another topic, I know I actually first got introduced to you through Samuk's talk where you spoke to him, and I know there you spoke a lot about being a parent, and how actually being a parent and your kids are your greatest accomplishment, right? So I'm really curious. I know you talked a little bit about first of all, Ankur Jain, who's your oldest son, he founded Kairos. He's done a lot in entrepreneurship. He's leading Kairos, I think a lot of companies under Kairos now. So what kind of lessons did you impart to your kids and make sure that, despite them growing up in an affluent home, how did they keep the values and continue to how do you impart your values to them basically, and give them a proper an education that's true for the 21st century, or that's necessary?
Yeah, I mean, one thing is, there are several things to unbundle in the question you're asking. One is the children don't do what you tell them to do. They do what they see you do. And that's really what most parents have such a difficult time understanding, right? So, for example, after my first company was widely successful, I could have easily said what a lot of parents would do, which is, hey, I want to spend, my children are young, I'm going to take time off, and I'm going to spend time with my family. Now imagine now sitting that look at that from the kids' perspective. Kids go to school and they see their dad sitting on the sofa watching CNBC. They come back from school working hard, and now they have homework to do. And what's dad doing? Dad is sitting on the sofa watching CNBC, and dad wants to now be entertained. Now the kids are home and kids got homework to do. And then they say, kids, you need to really work hard like I did, and you need to really be working hard all day to be successful. And all they're thinking in their mind is, when I grow up, I want to be just like my dad, sitting on the sofa and watching CNBC, right? And that's all. So you can tell them all you want, but what they're seeing is their dad sits at home all day and tells me to work hard. I'm not going to be that stupid, right? But guess what I did? After the first company became successful, we never said. I just went on to start the second one, and then the third one, and the fourth one. Is I didn't have to tell them that I do this because I need to make more money. I did it because I told them the problems are many, and you have to be. So we redefined what success meant. So what I said to them was, your success will never be measured by how much money you have in the bank. It will be measured by how many lives you are able to improve. And there is never enough. You can keep doing as much as you can in your lifetime. And the more you do, the more successful you are. And keep thinking bigger and bigger. And they saw that I'm going to keep doing it. I mean, now I'm 61. I mean, last company I started, I'm in like late 50s. And they all sat me down. Dad, healthcare? What do you know about healthcare? Why do you want to ever go do that? Take a retirement, go. This will never work. I mean, microbiome, who heard of microbiome? You've gone crazy now. Go retire. And guess what? Dad goes and shows that it can be done. It doesn't matter. And now that's the reason they are not afraid to take any moonshot anymore. And you see, if you just Google Ankur, I mean, he's literally on the cover of every magazine. And his sister, who graduated from Stanford, became Stanford STEM fellow, Stanford Mayfield fellow. She started a first company with a founder, which to remove the gender bias in hiring. She believes in helping women. And she just started her second company now on women's health. And it's amazing. She said, Dad, of course, I can go out and create a massive company just looking at women's health. And I can tell you the very interesting thing, how much you learn from your children. So she was with us 2 weeks ago. And I said, sweetie, how is your company coming along? And she looks at me and said, Dad, you know so little about entrepreneurship. It's like, really? I've done 7 companies. I don't know about entrepreneurship. She said, Dad, job of an entrepreneur is simply to experiment to figure out if there is a company. I am not building a company. I'm simply experimenting to figure out if there is a company to be built here. And think about that for a second here. As an entrepreneur, your job is not to build a company. Your job is to experiment enough times to figure out what will work so you can build a company. And that kind of lessons you can learn for sometime at 20-year-olds, right? And that was just amazing to see how much they have learned by simply watching me do things, right? The other thing we always taught them is that your self-worth will never come from how much you own. So you can be rich, but your worth is still zero. Your self-worth comes from what you create, not what you own. And if you haven't created anything, you're still a parasite on the society. So don't ever be a parasite, right? And that's really the things and we told them that, it's humility is a sign of success, right? So the day you become humble is the day you become successful. Because if you still have an arrogance left in you, that means you're still trying to prove something to yourself or someone else. Nobody successful says, do you know who I am? Nobody does that. Only the people who are not successful say, do you know who I am? The answer is nobody. So
awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, that's absolutely incredible. And I'm sure, best of luck, obviously. Encore, I put this in the chat, but he founded Kairos. Tile's founder is actually a Kairos fellow, and they're winding down the fellowship, but, it's all connected, everyone. It's all connected.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think, and especially, your daughter's, founding her own, experimenting to see if there's a company to be built in the first place.
And by the way, youngest son is the same one. Youngest one also graduated from Stanford, and then after Stanford, he became a Schwarzman scholar, and he just graduated as Schwarzman scholar, and now he's starting a company. And he said, Dad, of course I can start a company. And I said, go work somewhere, learn a few things. Dad, it's in my blood. That's all we do.
Exactly. I was going to say, following in your footsteps. It's in their DNA. That's fantastic. Absolutely.
It's in their RNA. It's in their mRNA, not in their DNA. Dude.
He got us. He got us. He got us. Oh, he got me good. Yeah, no, definitely. And that's, I think we're going to sort of ask a few questions from the chat. You guys are asking amazing questions. Madhavi is asking, how do these new startups compete with massive organizations like Facebook's, Apple's, Google's, Amazon's, who have these massive resources and capital that can build and rapidly build and, essentially the same or even better products? How do they realize these ideas?
It's interesting. The innovation never happens in these large companies. I mean, if you look at even Facebook today, the core Facebook is dead. I mean, look what is really working. Instagram, which they actually acquired and paid $1 billion to an entrepreneur when there were only 12 people. Think about that for a second. 12 people were kicking their ass and they had to shell out $1 billion just to keep them out. WhatsApp was kicking their ass and they had to pay $16 billion, $19 billion just to keep them in the loop. So my point is, yeah, there is no innovation. If you look at all of this stuff, Apple is all acquired. I mean, Siri, they acquired, they did not invent. So large companies are actually have to believe that these companies there is no innovation. They watch for you and I to do something unique, and then they think they can compete with you, but your job is to create something called flywheel. And I'm going to explain this concept because this is so important why most large companies, once you create the flywheel, they have no choice but to buy you. So the flywheel concept is, does your 100,000 customer get a better product than someone's first customer, right? So in a sense, if you get this water bottle, it doesn't matter I'm the first customer or I'm the millionth customer, I'm getting the same water bottle, right? Now, if you buy Viome today, the first day when we started, the first customer that came in, we knew very little only about what we learned from the literature. Now, as we started to analyze people, now we have 250,000 people. Now, with the 250,000 people, we actually figured out what works, what doesn't work, what nutrition they need, what foods they need. Now I have this flywheel. The next customer that comes in is benefiting from the knowledge that I collected from 250,000 people. Now, if Google wants to do that, they have to start with their first customer. And any customer who joins Google say, wait a sec, my recommendations are total piece of shit compared to Viome, because now they know so much about so many people. So now guess what happens? Google tries and nobody joins them because our information is substantially better and then they end up actually have to acquire or give up in that field, right? And that's literally what happens. Many of these companies fail because they can never ever compete with the flywheel once it gets created.
Wow, I think that's a really important concept to understand, and I think it definitely it's something that is not taught like very commonly to entrepreneurs. And the first time I heard it was in one of your talks as well, and I think it's absolutely vital to learn that early on. And so another question that we have in the chat is, what's the best advice? I think just to make this a bit more specific, I'd be curious. So once someone goes through the process of, thinking about why, like what is their big moonshot, so they think about why me, why now, and what the problem is, and then how do they get from there to first off like building their team and assembling a group of people who are really as passionate and as um, like who have the knowledge that they need to figure out this problem. And also I think one of the key things that I'm curious about is the companies you started, something like Viome, you had to educate people about why gut health is important, because people used to think, like you said, that they didn't necessarily know that it plays such a big role. So when you're trying to change people's mindsets about a big problem like this, how do you enroll people in the vision and get them to completely change their perspective about a problem?
Good question, by the way. It's really good. So interesting thing is it's so much easier now than it used to be 10 years ago, right? Because today, any one of us is an influencer. We have an idea, we go out and publicly post that idea on LinkedIn, on Instagram. I mean, you can literally find anyone you want to talk to or meet. I mean, that's the beauty is, I didn't know Senator said. I mean, we all met, and I don't know which social network, but somebody reached out and things got connected. There is no one actually you can't reach today. So my point I'm trying to make is that get your idea out there, and there are going to be people that say, I love your idea. How can I be helpful to you? But remember, always ask for help. So when you go out and post something and say, and I need your help for X, Y, and Z. And once you do that, there is someone who's going to say, I can help you, or I know someone who can help you, right? So the thing I always, told our children, once you have something, share. Because one of the things that they are taught people is keep your idea to yourself because someone else might copy you. And I always tell people, if the only thing you have going for yourself is somehow idea that can easily be copied by someone else, then you really have nothing, because sooner or later is going to get announced, and then what, right? The thing is, it is the execution that counts. It is the team that you build that count. It's a flywheel that you build that count. So don't worry about sharing your ideas. In fact, more you share and more you talk to people, they ask you 10 different questions, and it allows you to modify and make your idea better, because, oh, I never thought of that. Oh, I never actually thought about that. And then literally when you are out there really pitching for raising money, now you have refined all the questions that people may ask, and you have answers to all of them, right? So to me, share with as many people as you can. Use the social network to go out and let people know what you want to do and where you need help. And it'll be surprising for you to see how much help you can get just using the social network.
Right. And for the second part of the question, in terms of educating people, could you
Yeah.
touch on that as well?
Yeah, so it's interesting is that, so the way I look at the stuff is, it's not that I have a crystal ball of why microbiome is going to become the next big thing. It is actually really simple thing. You read the scientific literature, and if there is, everybody is talking in the scientific literature, if you read. So what I do is, on my Twitter feed, I just only use the scientific journals. So I look at Nature, Science, and all the scientific journals. If everyone is talking about a certain subject, it's going to become popular in the next five years. It's going to become mainstream. So now it's very clear. Everyone in the scientific literature is start to look around at it. We have capabilities to do anti-aging. Guess what? In 5 years, people are going to say, oh, anti-aging is really big. Of course it is big, because we are seeing what's happening in the science. And that's really what happens is, so we saw the trend around microbiome and the scientific literature. Guess what? Today, Lady Gaga on Instagram is talking about microbiome is really big thing for beauty. It's like, really, lady, you just learned that?
Amazing.
So I hope I answered the question. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I think another question in the chat, I think you kind of touched on how to think about investor funding, but I think maybe specifically about getting, I think it's similar to when you're trying to get an investor to buy into a really bold vision. And do you specifically look for some specific types of investors who are more likely to buy into something where you might not have something concrete yet, but have this bold vision? Or and how do you enroll people in general into really kind of a vision that might seem unrealistic at times?
So basically, so you have to have a really grand vision, but when it comes to execution, you don't say, I'm going to boil this ocean. You actually say, my first thing I'm going to do is to do this. And from this, we're going to learn this to be able to do these three things. And these three, we're going to learn X, Y, and Z, and to be able to do this. And next thing you know, I'm actually going out and executing this vision. But my first step is to just do that. And if that is successful, that's the first step is towards this massive vision, right? So what we said was, look, I mean, it's really interesting phenomena was we said, we're going to analyze the gut microbiome. And we know so little about gut microbiome to be able to make you recommendations at that time, 5 years ago, what foods you should eat or not eat. There is some very limited knowledge we have there. And we say, look, how do we get this thing started? And we said, we do know that commodity stuff that exists. If we can figure out how people respond to certain glucose and fiber in their body, and we can give them a shake, we can measure their glucose before they drank it and after they drank it. It is complete commodity, but we're going to bundle that with our gut microbiome test as a free test. And now we have two tests. And guess what happens? Even though our recommendations were all coming from one test, it allowed us to learn on the gut microbiome. And guess what? After 1,000 customers, we say, we don't need a stupid drink. We can now figure out just from the gut microbiome what to do. And we got rid of the test, but got us started, right? So the thing is, what's the first step you take that allows you to learn what you don't know? And that will say, now we said, okay, so now we had about 100,000 people that have done the gut test, and we knew really well what supplements you need, what nutrition you need, what's happening in your body just by basing on your gut microbiome. And we now wanted to learn about how does the gut microbiome changes the host side, the human side. And we said, we're going to start launching the blood prick test. And we said, well, we don't really know what additional recommendation would we make once we have this blood. And we said, but we know few things here. So let's launch them together. Now we're going to bundle the stool and blood together, even though 90% of the recommendation is going to come from a stool and 10% from blood. Guess what happened? 6 months later, now we have 50,000 people who have now taken both tests. And guess what? Now the recommendations come both from blood and stool. And now we're saying, can we now add saliva to it? Because there's a lot of oral microbiome. When you're chewing your food, it's modifying your food. Can we add that? And guess what we're going to do? We're going to put these two and put the saliva on top of it. In the beginning, there's going to be a few things coming from saliva. Next thing you know, we're going to have everything about saliva, right? That's literally about bootstrapping these things to learn from what to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's a very, very great insight once again. Just quickly, I think Irene wanted to sort of clarify the question. So yeah, I will love to. I think, go ahead.
Yeah, if you could do it. I know we have some other questions, so maybe if you could do it quickly, that would be great.
Actually, I only have a few minutes left. I need to really leave by 5.
Yeah.
So if I can give maybe a few minutes after that, but it really needs to end soon.
For sure.
For sure.
Yeah, just final.
Right. I'll ask it real quick. I love how you said look at the roots of the problem instead of the things that it causes, and that's what I've been doing with my startup. And so I came up with an idea, and I gathered a team of teenage Apple winners to program it. So like you said, to work for free. But it's a very idealistic idea. And while we have the first version of the platform, we don't really have the way to make money yet. We only have a way to revolutionize it, to really make a change. Do you have any tips for finding investors that want to invest in idealistic startups that don't necessarily make money yet?
Yeah. So I think great question. But remember, just because the product that you're making is actually doesn't make money, doesn't mean you can create the things that will actually make money. So let me give you an idea. So today, look at Facebook. The social networking thing that Mark Zuckerberg programmed, that is, you can't make money off it. What you make money off is the people who are using the product. So the product is not the website, the product is you, and the customer is the advertiser. So they are monetizing you, not the product. That is simply the means to get the product, which is the you. You are the user that they're monetizing. So my point is, so for example, you're doing something idealistic like building the shelter for women. Guess what? That is not what you want to monetize. Now you have all these women who are living in the shelter. Now you can go to the local businesses. He said, we have these women who are dedicated. They can work for the minimum wage, and you can essentially are not only getting a great dedicated labor, now these women are also getting trained, and suddenly you're monetizing the women who need help because they are battered at home. So they come into your shelter, but you're actually making money from the local businesses where they are working, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that you can have an idealistic product, but the group that you create around it, the people who are using your product, you can monetize that users in a number of different ways.
Great. Yeah, hopefully that answered your question. And I know since you have to go, Naveen, do you have time for a final question? One
Sure.
more?
Yeah,
Or,
one more, yes. Yeah.
Awesome. So a lot of people are asking about education and either about how to cultivate it and or they're working on that problem themselves. So maybe in terms of Yash's question, how do you think we can teach students to think critically and build problem solving skills? But basically, if you could just explain how you would, what your vision is of like your dream school or the dream education system and how it would work. Yeah, if you could talk about that.
Actually, that's a really, really easy question. I wrote that whole article. So if you go to just Google, type Naveen Jain Forbes education, I have written 2 articles on it. One is why education is ripe for disruption, and second is how to build the next century's education system. And you will find all my thoughts in there.
Okay, great. That was quick. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you so much, Naveen. I know we have some more questions, but I know you have to go. So, but you were
please, best is reach out to me on a social network.
Right.
I'm, any place. Follow me on LinkedIn. Follow me on Instagram and on Clubhouse. Every so often I do a Clubhouse, and we can continue the conversation.
Great. Yeah, someone was asking about how to follow up. So yeah, that's how you can find Naveen. Again, thank you so much, Naveen. This was amazing.
Thank you.
And I think
thank you, Sanat. Thank you, Sid. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.